This happened to my best mate's sister's friend. So yes, there are a few degrees of separation here. However, the story has always stuck with me. For over 10 years now since I first heard it. I've never met the person, yet my mate's sister claims that her friend was in tears, retelling the story due to just how chilling it is, and the horrors of what could have been. The friend's name was Anna. One evening, Anna was driving home from work at the end of a long day. Despite being exhausted after her shift, she is a careful driver and always maintains a sense of awareness of everything going on around her while driving. This includes carefully obeying the speed limit, the road rules, being conscious of the lane that she would be in for any upcoming turns or exits, as well as having a sense of all the other vehicles around her. Driving is not a difficult thing to do. However, height and caution should always be exercised when behind the wheel. Now, while sitting on a busy motorway, the traffic was relatively heavy from the after-work rush, yet was still flowing without any stops. Every now and then, she would peer into the rearview mirror just to get a sense of the traffic behind her. This white van had been behind her for no longer than a minute and was maintaining a safe distance from her. These glances behind were just a routine, autopilot measure to have an awareness of her surroundings. She didn't even look at the person-shaped silhouette driving the van and more, just momentarily gazed at everything in the mirror. She subconsciously acknowledged that a person was obviously driving this vehicle, but did not directly look at them. In the very brief moments that she would look back, after a short while of being followed by this van, she takes another look in the mirror. She then automatically reverts her eyesight back onto the road. However, in that extremely short glance, she saw something that instantly darted her eyes back into the mirror. Like a double take with just using her eyes. Instead of turning the whole head, another figure had emerged on the passenger side of the front seat. They had appeared to have been on the floor of the front seat and had now rose up to be in view. The instant Anna gave a more detailed look in the mirror and actually consciously viewed what she was seeing, her heart dropped. It was a little girl, and she was bawling her eyes out. She had placed both hands on the front windshield screen and was looking directly ahead. She had such a terrified look on her face, one of horror and desperation, that it was painfully obvious that she was in distress. In that instant, the driver of the van reached over and placed his hand directly on her head, shoved the girl back down onto the floor and out of view from anyone outside the vehicle. Anna couldn't believe what she had just seen. She had a look at the person driving the van and saw a guy fitting the exact description of an unwelcoming character, a CD hair thinning, hunched-over, creepy-looking man driving an unmarked van. After briefly processing what she had just witnessed, Anna goes into full panic mode. It all happened so quickly that she's still not sure what she even witnessed was real. She is really exhausted and also trying to concentrate on driving. However, she knows that she needs to act right now, in case something malicious is actually happening here. She pulls out her phone and immediately calls 000, the Australian version of 911 for our American friends. And while I don't condone being on the phone while driving, emergencies are an absolute exception. She explains to the officer what she thinks she just saw. She is not even fully finished, proving the full account of what had happened, before the officer interrupted her. Can you provide a description of the little girl? Sure. She was probably no older than 5. Had blonde hair. I didn't get a good look. The officer interrupts her again. Where are you right now? And what's the description of the van? Anna could immediately sense the urgency in the air. She gives a rough location of where on the motorway. She is the description of the van, the license plate number, and a description of the guy. The officer thanks Anna and tells her to stay on the phone. She is ordered to listen very carefully and to stay calm. She first requests that Anna try to follow the van, being in front of the van on a busy motorway. The logistics of getting behind the vehicle may prove tricky, however. The traffic gods were on her side that day, and she was able to change lanes and revert back without any hassles. Anna follows the van, while the officer is constantly requesting updates of their location and reassuring Anna that she is doing a good job. The van continues to drive as normal, and eventually signals that it is taking an upcoming exit. Anna follows. They continue for maybe 10 minutes, and Anna starts to feel nervous. She is tailgating the van and taking every turn that it does. At one stage, he runs a red light, as the van only just made it through the orange. She starts to get the sense that the van driver may know that he's being followed. The whole time, Anna is providing updates of where they are and what turns they make when out of nowhere. In a scene much like an action movie, about 4 cop cars swarm on the van, lights flashing and sirens blaring. They cut the van off, and all the traffic comes to a stop. Suddenly, a bunch of police officers get out and surround the van, guns drawn, and screaming at the driver to exit the vehicle. The 000 officer on the phone tells Anna to hang up and to drive away from the scene. She hangs up, however, is unable to move due to the cop cars in the van now blocking the road. She witnesses the man exit the van and lay face down on the ground, while a police officer rushes to the passenger side and retrieves the little girl. The man is cuffed and LED away, and after which officers check the van, guns still drawn and on high alert. This whole time, Anna is almost in a state of shock at what she has just witnessed. Traffic is built up around them now and can see other people in their cars, wide-eyed in disbelief at what is going on. After a few brief moments, a cop car finally moves, opening up a one-lane for traffic to continue past the incident, with a police officer signaling traffic to go. Anna drives past the commotion and reroutes to her home. She drives all the way home in complete silence, just thinking about what had just happened. She is experiencing so many emotions all at once, of fear, disgust, and confusion. But after logically piecing together all the events that just happened, she eventually comes to have an overwhelming sense of only one emotion: relief. That girl obviously needed help. A man was obviously planning something nasty. And I realized that she was so lucky to look back in that mirror when she did. And she was so relieved that she called 000. She began thinking about what may have happened if she had second-guessed what she saw and didn't call in to report it. While she was pulling into her street, she received a call from a blocked number. Usually, she wouldn't answer any blocked or unknown numbers. However, given what had just happened, she picked it up right away. It was the officer, and she opened by, again, thanking Anna for calling in and assisting. By following the van, the officer then said something that Anna had pretty much already figured out herself. However, it was very validating to have it confirmed. I can't tell you anything about the matter, as it's an ongoing investigation. However, I can tell you one thing. You saved that little girl's life. Back in 1999, I was excited to learn that my friend had moved out of his parents' house into his own place, a cozy, single-floor home equipped with enough room to accommodate a small family. The day started innocently enough. My friend had bought an old house, not too far from where his parents lived, a fixer-upper with creaky floors and a faint, musty smell that clung to the air. He asked me to come over and help him clean out the chimney, a task that he'd been putting off since moving in. I agreed, figured that it would be a quick job, a chance to catch up and maybe even laugh about the quirks of his new place. The house itself was weathered, its faded paint peeling like dead skin, and the chimney loomed over the roof, dark and jagged against the gray autumn sky. We hauled the ladder into the living room, where the fireplace sat, its mouth blackened and gaping. The air inside was chilly, despite the autumn warmth outside, and the faint scent of old smoke lingered. Armed with brushes and a bucket, we got to work quickly here. I climbed up first, peering into the chimney's throat. It was clogged with years, maybe even decades of soot, thick and powdery, clinging to the bricks like a second skin. I started scraping, and soon dark clouds of ash billowed out, coating my hands, my clothes, my face, My friend stood below holding the bucket, coughing as the dust rained down. "Careful up there," his voice muffled through the haze. But the soot, it was relentless. It spilled over the edges, piling onto the hardwood floor in soft, black heaps. I tried to contain it, but the more I brushed, the worse it got. By the time that I climbed down, the room looked like a coal mine after a cave-in. Smudges streaked the walls, and the floor was buried under a fine, gritty layer that crunched underfoot. My friend stared at the mess, hands on his hips, his face smeared with streaks of black. "This is hopeless," he muttered, exasperated. "Let's just leave it for now. How about a late lunch? We'll deal with this disaster later." I nodded, wiping my hands on my pants, leaving dark stains behind. My throat was dry, and the idea of fresh air and food sounded like salvation at this stage. We locked the door behind us and we headed out, leaving the chaos of soot and shadows in our wake. Lunch was uneventful, a greasy diner a few miles away. Burgers and fries small, talk about the house and its endless list of repairs. The whole time, though, something nagged at me. Maybe it was the way that the house had felt when we left, but it was like it was holding its breath waiting. I brushed it off as exhaustion and too much ash in my lungs, but when we returned an hour later, the sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows through the windows. The front door creaked as we pushed it open, and the air inside felt heavier than before, thick with a silence that pressed against my ears. My friend stepped in first, then stopped dead. I bumped into him, confused until I saw what he was staring at. The soot on the floor wasn't how we left it. It had been disturbed, shifted in chaotic patterns, as if something had moved through it. And there, stark against the dark powder, were footprints. Not ours, though. These were smaller, narrower, with an odd sort of elongated shape to the toes. Like pointy shoes or maybe boots or something. They started near the fireplace and scattered outward, weaving across the room in no clear direction. My stomach twisted as I followed their path with my eyes. The prints didn't stop at the floor, though. They suddenly began to climb the wall, impossibly smudged and uneven, as if whatever had made them had skirted up the vertical surface with ease. Higher still, they began dotting the ceiling, a trail of dark smears overhead, defying gravity. "What the heck?" my friend whispered, his voice barely audible. My skin prickled, every hair standing on end. Suddenly, we hadn't been gone long, too. Barely an hour, no one else had a key. No animals could have gotten in, not without leaving other signs. At least, and yet there they were. Footprints on the ceiling, like some nightmare had danced across the room. While we were away, we should check the house, man, I said, though my voice trembled. He nodded, pale and wide-eyed. We grabbed a broom and a flashlight from the kitchen, our footsteps loud in the oppressive quiet. We moved into the dining room, away from the fireplace, to regroup and figure out what the heck to do. The air there was colder still now, and the windows rattled faintly, though there was no wind outside. We stood close, whispering theories. Intruders' pranks. Something rational. When I felt it, a chill sharper than before crawling up my spine. I instinctively looked up, and above us on the dining room ceiling was another set of footprints. Seemingly fresh, the soot was still damp-looking, glistening faintly in the dim light, as if they'd been made just moments ago. They didn't connect to the walls or the floor, just appeared mid-ceiling, hovering over us. My breath suddenly caught, and my friend followed my gaze. He suddenly let out a choking sound, somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. The prints, they were angled toward us, toes pointed down, as if whatever had left them had paused to look, to watch maybe. The room seemed to shrink, the shadows deepening in the corners, and I swore that I heard a faint scrape, like nails on wood, echo from somewhere above the ceiling. My heart suddenly hammered, loud enough to drown out everything else. We didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at those impossible marks, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did not then, at least. But the weight of it, the presence, it lingered thick and suffocating. We backed out of the house, not turning our backs on that room. Until we were outside, the door slammed shut behind us, and neither of us wanted to go back in. Not that day, at least. And in my case, not ever. So what could it have been? Something trapped in the chimney, stirred awake by our meddling, a remnant of the house's past, clinging to its bones or something else. Maybe something that didn't belong in this world at all. So our farm has 7.5 acres. We have goats, chickens, turkeys, dogs, and cats. We had cows at the time of this as well, but we don't have them anymore. My aunt's family lives on our land with us, and we all do stuff around the farm together, milking, gathering eggs, feeding animals, etc. And well, about a year ago, my aunt was walking through our pasture, out to the chicken pen that we set up to shut them in for the night. We had a few goats and an electric fence by the front of our property, and as she was walking back to her house, she heard a female voice say, "Hi goats, goaty." Goaty goats in a kind of high-pitched way. She looked around, but nobody was outside but her. Super weird, right? Well, my brother was feeding our dogs when he heard a female voice say, "Here, chickie." Chickie to the baby chicks that were at the front of our property, same spot as the goats were at a week prior. Again, no one there and super weird. My cousin was over for the weekend, like 3 weeks after the second incident happened. My cousin and I were standing on the deck at night when we both turned at the same time towards a female voice singing. Upon hearing that too, I was freaked. That was the first time that I had heard anything, and genuinely it scared me. My dad started keeping a bat by the door at this point. And maybe a month later, my aunt and mother were in the barn with the goats, unable to exit the barn. I walked in at some stage, and they asked if I had been playing with the dogs, and talking to them I definitely had not, though I had just walked outside straight to the barn. Plus, the dogs were not even there at that stage. But they said that they had heard a female voice, talking to the dogs just outside of the barn, that sounded like me. Something you should know, too, is that my mother, my aunt, and I are the only women that live on this property. There are 2 little girls, but it's a young woman's voice that people keep hearing, and they say that it sounds like me. So yeah, really creepy, and this has been going on for a long time now. We always joke around if things get lost, or if things get moved, like maybe the acreage ghost took it. And well, if it wasn't you, it must have been the acreage ghost. Things like that. I'm wondering, though, if anyone has had any similar experiences, and if you have any thoughts on what this could be. Also, only old women live around us, and it would be super weird for them to show up like that. Plus, like I said, people have looked around and they haven't been able to find anyone. Also, I probably should mention, too, that one night I was outside on the deck of my house with my Rottweiler and Great Pyrenees. My Rottweiler suddenly became very alert and wouldn't look away from one corner of the deck. My Great Pyrenees ran away at this stage. Nora, though, my Rottie, usually a super sweet pup that only ever barks at coyotes, started growling and barking at the corner. It was super unusual behavior for her. But then I started hearing thumping sounds in the distance. Nora didn't really acknowledge those. She was too focused on the corner at this stage. But then the sound started moving closer, so I decided then to just book it into the house. And thankfully, nothing happened after that. But I won't lie and say that it definitely spooked me. In my life, I've had a few paranormal encounters. I'm going to share a few that have always stood out to me. So my first encounter was when I was about 9 or 10. My family lived in an old farmhouse that I believe was built in the 40s. I shared the upstairs room with 2 of my siblings. It was the original attic, but a former owner had converted it into a bedroom of sorts. So my bed was wedged in between this area, that LED to the window. I always slept with my feet to the window, and this particular night, I decided to sleep the other way around so that I was facing out into the room. Well, I woke up in the middle of the night to the room glowing a green, cyan color. I looked up and it was an old woman, likely in her 80s, floating above me. The source of the glow was her, and her entire body in clothes. She was wearing a nightgown, and I remember seeing the fabric and her hair sort of sway through the air, like it was underwater or something. I could see right through her, and she was staring directly into my eyes. I felt no fear when I looked at her. I don't think it was a dream, and I know that this wasn't sleep paralysis, because I could move. After that, I never saw her again. I do think about her often, though, and I have a visual and auditory thought process, so I can remember images and videos in my mind pretty easily. Anyway, another is from around September of 2024. It was exactly 1:00 a.m. on a school night. I had all the lights on in my room, and I was about to get up and turn them off so that I could go to sleep, when out of nowhere, I heard 3 loud knocks on my window, which is right by my bed where I was sitting. I pulled my blinds back to see who was out there, thinking that maybe one of my friends was trying to get me to sneak out with them or whatever. But when I did, no one was there. It was very odd too, because my window leads to the backyard, and it's very loud to walk to the ground by the window like that, and surely I would have heard someone approaching. Anyways, I started walking towards my door, and the power in my house went out for a split second. Lights turned off, my PC reset, and when I walked out to the living room, I saw that even the Wi-Fi router was resetting. This is another odd thing, because there was no bad weather, and the breaker panel is in my garage. And well, I walked by the front door, which has these tall windows on either side of it, and I nearly had a heart attack when I saw a white figure run by the windows. I quickly ran to the door and locked it, and while I was standing there, I heard the same 3 loud knocks on the other, separate window to the left of the door. I booked it back up to my room and grabbed my Bowie knife, and I didn't sleep that night. I guess you could say that this was just someone playing a trick on me, but it all happened within about 30 seconds. And really, there's just no way that they could run all the way around the house and out through the gate and in the yard within that time. Maybe they hopped the fence closer. But the fence is rotten and collapsing, and it definitely would have fallen over if they had tried. Also, I mean, how do you explain the power turning off at the same time that this all happened? Weird, right? Anyway, the last story that I have time for is a little bit shorter. So I sneak out a lot and walk to my friends' houses at night. It's a 20-minute walk. I hear a lot of weird noises out there, and I swear on my life that I've been followed by some sort of a creature multiple times. Like one night I was almost home, and I started hearing coyotes howl off in the distance. This is normal here, so I didn't think too much of it at first. The howl started getting closer, though. And then there were the whispers. The sounds started getting closer and closer, until I heard them surrounding me from, like, all directions. To my right side was a tree line. Front and back were a straight road. My left was my town's elementary and middle school, and I saw nothing. But the sounds were so close now that they must have been at max, like 20 feet away. Well, as you can imagine, I was pretty freaked out by that, So I ran all the way home, and I locked the door behind me, and yet had another sleepless night there. The first encounter was in Denton, Texas, and everything else that I've encountered has been the past year in a small town in North Central, East Texas on the border of Oklahoma. But what do you guys think about all of my experiences? Have you heard or had any similar encounters yourself? And if you have, then what do you think that I should do about all of this? I want to share one of the most chilling experiences that I've ever had. This happened about 3 years ago. So that day, my cousin was taking his final breaths. I sat beside him holding his hand, whispering hope for the best. Everything will be all right. But deep down, we both knew tears streamed down his face. And then in his last moments, his body started releasing waste onto the bed, a detail that I'll never forget. Minutes later, he exhaled for the last time and he was gone. But the strange part didn't start until the funeral. As we lifted his body from the bed to prepare it for cremation, a bit of the waste unknowingly smeared onto my arm. I didn't notice at first, but as we began carrying him, I started smelling something. Faint at first and then stronger. The closer that we got to the fire, the worse the smell became. And I mean, not just bad, but like unbearable. It wasn't like anything that I'd ever experienced before. Still, though, I said nothing to be respectful, forced myself through it, and helped place his body on the fire. Once the funeral ended, I went straight to a nearby water source, and I washed the area thoroughly. I made sure that there was nothing left, and then I got on my bike to head home, about 20 kilometers away. It was around 7:30 p.m., and the roads are usually busy at that time, well lit and full of vehicles. But that night it was just eerily dead. Not a single truck or car in sight. In fact, just me and the road about 13 kilometers. There's a beach on the right side of the road, and while passing it, I saw someone lying by the roadside. Just a few meters away, I figured that it was a drunk or a drug addict, so I ignored it. But then that same smell hit me again. The exact unbearable stench from earlier. I told myself that it was nothing, that I just needed to shower when I got home. But suddenly the smell intensified. So much so that it was choking me, like it was being forced up my nose or something. And that was when I saw it. A black figure, short, barely reaching half of my height, just standing in the middle of the road ahead. I didn't stop, though. I couldn't stop. Something deep inside of me screamed that if I did, something terrible was going to happen. I swerved past it at full speed, but the moment that I passed it, I heard it behind me chasing me. I was going at like 90 kilometers an hour at least, and this thing was keeping pace. I didn't dare look back. I just rode as fast as I could. When I finally reached my street and pulled over, I felt frozen. My body was ice cold. With fear, I checked my forearm where the waste had been earlier, and I had washed it. I swear that I had washed it. But now it was back the same foul smear. That same stench. I don't know what followed me that night, or if it was ever just about the waste. All I know is that since that day, weird things keep happening to me. Shadows where there shouldn't be any, the smell returning out of nowhere, and dreams so vivid that I wake up drenched in sweat. Even sharing this now, I'm getting goosebumps all over my arms. If you've ever experienced something like this, then I would really like to know that I'm not alone. And also, I would like to know how to get rid of this. This is without a doubt one of the top 5 scariest days of our lives. My husband and I, we've talked about it countless times since then, but the fear, the uncertainty, the sheer helplessness of that day, it's something that still sits with us. So I was 6 months pregnant. Vulnerable, emotional, excited about our beach vacation, but that excitement turned to dread. In a matter of moments, It all started as we crossed into North Carolina, cruising along I-40. The weather, it had been ominous, but we had no idea just how bad things were about to get. Suddenly, not even 5 car lengths ahead of us, the road simply vanished, completely washed out by floodwaters. We slammed on the brakes, hearts pounding. And you know that surreal moment where your brain can't process what you're seeing. It was like something out of a disaster movie. But it wasn't a movie, this was real. The roar of the water beneath the crumbling pavement echoed all around us. And then just 4 car lengths ahead of us. We could hear it happening. The road was collapsing and breaking apart, slipping away into the raging river below. We were trapped, boxed in by concrete barriers, helplessly watching as the earth gave way right in front of us. No cell service, no way to call for help. I kept thinking that I'm 6 months pregnant. We're out here alone. No one knows that we're here. And then strangers became our saviors. A few good Samaritans appeared like angels, working together to dismantle part of the highway barrier. Piece by piece, they tore it down, giving us an escape route. As the road behind us crumbled into the river, we turned around and we fled, heading back toward Tennessee, desperate to find another way. For a while, it felt like we were driving through a ghost world. Winding mountain roads, fallen trees blocking parts of the path, heavy rain turning everything into slick mud. Still no service too. It was just the 2 of us, and the life growing inside of me, trapped in the backwoods. Finally, though, a bar of service, a lifeline, we found a route that led us towards Asheville, North Carolina. But what we drove into, it was worse than we could have imagined. Catastrophic flooding. Roads submerged beneath rushing water. Cars, stranded homes overtaken. We had no service again, and the road that we'd come in on, well, it closed right behind us. Everywhere we turned, we hit a dead end. No gas stations with power. No open restaurants, hotel after hotel full. People were stranded, desperate. And we were too. Our gas gauge crept lower and lower, and I felt panic setting in. With barely a quarter tank left, we pulled into a truck stop parking lot. No lights, no sound. Just darkness pressing in from every side. We had some snacks and some water. Pillows and a blanket, just enough to get by. I suppose so we hunkered down, listening to the wind howl and the rain lash the roof. It felt like the world had gone quiet. Well, all except for the storm. That is, hours passed. The night dragged on. And then sometime at around 12:30, or 1 in the morning, my husband noticed something. A line of lights on the I-26 started moving. Could it be open? We waited, watched, prayed. Finally, we decided to risk it. With what little gas that we had left, we merged onto the interstate. Desperate for a way out, the landscape, though, was unrecognizable. Standing water across the lanes, debris scattered everywhere. Branches hold trees. Signs bent and broken, the remnants of landslides. Fresh mud slicked across the pavement. Mile after mile, we drove in silence, scanning for any sign of life. About 20 miles in, we saw it. A gas station dimly lit but open. Cash only. By some miracle, we had enough too. We filled up, hearts pounding with relief. We certainly weren't out of danger yet, but that gas station felt like salvation for us. And it wasn't until about nearly an hour later that our cell phones finally chirped back to life. The first signal that we'd had in 14 hours. Now, when we finally pulled into our hotel, in South Carolina, exhausted, shaken 12 hours later than planned, we could barely believe that we'd made it. I will never forget that night. The fear, the helplessness, the kindness of strangers, and the eerie post-storm silence, broken only by the creak of trees and the rush of unseen waters. We will certainly tell this story to our daughter, one day the night that we fought to get to safety. The night that we learned just how fragile our control really is when nature takes over. And I promise you this much too. I will never tease my father-in-law about carrying that old school atlas ever again. I'll start this by saying that I'm actually quite skeptical about paranormal activity. But this happened to me when I was 5 years old. Now 39. So my mom told me what happened when I was 18. Said that she didn't want to tell me when I was younger, in case it sort of traumatized me or whatever. My dad told me the exact same story when I was 21. My parents split up when I was 10. They didn't keep in touch with each other, and if they did, it wouldn't be to conspire to terrify me. So I don't know, perhaps there is something in it. I kind of remember certain things as if it were a dream, but I certainly don't remember all of it. So as I mentioned, I was 5, and we had just relocated to a small town in the UK. In the town was an abandoned airfield, and our house was located at the edge of this. On the other side was marshland for miles. It was a pretty isolated location. Actually, the house was one of 4 or 5 that was converted from a large barn, at the time being a small town. My mom would meet with people, and they would instantly know that she wasn't from there. They'd start asking questions, which inevitably led to her explaining that she had just moved into the area. Once they found out exactly where, they would always get a little bit twitchy. I guess my mom eventually asked someone if they were okay. And they explained that apparently the house was cursed. That outcast from the town used to go there to, practice dark magic back in the olden days. I know it's a bit silly, but bear with me. So lo and behold, strange things began to happen. We had 2 cats, and one time, they both climbed up a wall in the house. Before turning and looking at me, I had an imaginary friend at the time, a little boy, and a few other things happened. But I'll skip to the good bits now. I sort of remember this part. But to give you an idea of the layout, the house had a sort of central floor, door leading to a downstairs lobby, and a staircase in the middle. Upstairs was balconies on either side of the staircase. Leading to the bedrooms, I was first on the right, and I had a cabin bed in my room, with wardrobes underneath. Most nights I would have recurring dreams about wolves, chasing me through a forest. The dream would end at the same point every night, as well, and one night it carried on past the usual ending point. I got out of the woods and turned, and then woke up with a jolt, just as the wolves were about to pounce on me. Immediately after I woke up, though, a hand slammed itself against the edge of the bed frame. Scared, I hit it hard and felt like I made contact. A dark figure ran out of the room, through the closed door, letting off a high-pitched scream. The next thing that happened was the worst, though. My mom put me to bed one night, and she went back downstairs. And my dad was at work at this stage. A short while later, she heard screaming from my bedroom. She said that it was like blood-curdling, fearing for your life sort of screaming. She ran upstairs our black dog. Cannot remember what breed, kind of greyhoundy in size and build though, but was sat just outside of the door as if guarding it. She opened the door, and the screaming immediately stopped. Silence except for one thing. In the middle of my room, all of my toys were stacked one on top of the other, way higher than I could have reached. At the top was a teddy bear that played a tune. When you pressed on its stomach, and the tune was playing. She looked in my bed and I wasn't there. She searched the house top to bottom, panicking but couldn't find me. She eventually went to the next door neighbors to ask for their help, and search of the area took place. And eventually I was found in a bed in the next door neighbor's house, on the opposite side of the wall to my bed. And apparently I was fast asleep. Well, we moved out the next day, and we then rented the house to a family that owned the local Italian restaurant. At that place, one evening it didn't take long. There was a knock at the door, and the man threw the keys into our house and said that he won't step foot into there ever again. No other explanation. It turns out that that house was well known in the area. And in order for us to sell it, we had to have the house blessed. So before selling, my parents arranged for someone to come and visit the house who could tell us more about it as well, and they said that there were two spirits, a young boy and a very dark spirit. The boy had been apparently hiding from the dark spirit for some time. I'm not sure what happened to that house after that, as we moved out of the area a couple of years later. But I did happen to be working nearby a few years ago and decided to drive to the house. I parked up at the end of the lane, looked at the house, and I swear that I've never put my foot down so quickly in my life. The feeling that I got from that place, just looking at it, was awful. I want to tell you about a story that scared me as a teenager, and really I still don't know how to feel about it. I'm a 16-year-old girl from Russia, quite petite and with a fair appearance, and this is important for further context. Now I went to Turkey on vacation with my family. I play sports, so the first thing that I did at the hotel was go play beach volleyball. There, we met for the first time with 19-year-old trainer, Ibrahim. After the volleyball tournament took place, he came up to me and asked me in Russian what my name was and how old I was. Of course, I told him that I was 16. And he told me in the same way in Russian, "Wow, you're very little." I didn't pay attention to this. I decided that it was common politeness, because I don't really have that much experience with boys. Well, the next day I came to play volleyball again, and then after the game he asked me for my number. I, a naive fool, decided that he just wanted to chat. Nothing more, because I don't like guys like him, and I prefer European boys. But he offered to see me after he finished work, and since I hardly communicate with non-Russian speakers, decided that this could be a good opportunity to practice my English. And about 10 p.m. we met on the beach. At first, there was nothing to it. We talked about simple topics. He was surprised that I was Russian and spoke English. I became a little bit scared when I realized just how helpless I was against the background of this big, athletic Turk guy who could definitely knock me down and break me if he wanted to, after he took my hand without my permission and said, "You have such warm and small hands. I like it." On the way back, he asked how many boyfriends I'd had, and when I said that I wasn't dating anyone, he asked, "Have you ever kissed a boy?" In parting, he tried to hug me and kiss me on the cheek. I didn't understand this, and so I just dodged it. But after that, I started to avoid him. He continued to write to me, and I tried not to answer. Unnecessarily, every time that I came to play volleyball, he took off his t-shirt. At first, I didn't care. But after a couple of days, I stopped going to volleyball altogether, and saw at one point that he was playing with his t-shirt on without me. Then he began insisting on meeting, talking about how sweet I was to him, and how he would like to kiss me, stalked me on the hotel grounds, and even when I was eating on the terrace with my family, he began approaching us like a waiter. I had a bit of a panic attack at one point, from the thought that we're in a sort of closed territory. He often came up to me when I was somewhere alone, asking, "Why are you so tense and sad all the time?" Said things that frightened me as well. Like, "You look so cute to me. I really want to kiss you, quite honestly." I was afraid of him, but I tried not to show it. The most unpleasant thing, though, is that at the beginning of this story, all my friends said, "This is just an ordinary fling on vacation. Let yourself have some fun," because he probably seemed attractive to them. But then even they began to be afraid of him. In the end, I just sort of blocked him and stopped interacting with him completely. But as a little girl, this still scares me. And I don't know if it's my fault that he saw me as a piece of meat or not. But still, I mean, I'm 16, this guy is way too old for me. I'm way underage, and honestly, the whole situation is just really creepy. I was 15 when this happened, so this would have been around 2011. So, my family and I were having dinner on a Sunday evening at my grandma's farmhouse. Most of my family lives in several separate houses, on a piece of farmland surrounded by 80 acres of woods in Appalachian, Ohio. I didn't have internet until maybe about 10 years ago, so you can imagine just how remote it is back there. After dinner that evening, my 6 or 7-year-old cousin left to go walk, the 5-minute walk, down a gravel trail next to the woods, to go to his house while the rest of the family were still eating. But just a minute after he left, he came rushing back into the house, out of breath and trying desperately to tell my grandparents that he saw something while on the walk home. They brushed it off as at this time he was often pretty rambunctious, and they probably assumed that he was just being goofy or was simply mistaken or something. But I volunteered to go outside with him and to check more so, because I was sure that he was being dramatic and wanted to poke fun at him, really. But sure enough, we walked up to the trail, directly behind my grandma's house, and he stopped in his tracks. He pointed his little finger out directly to the woods, and my eyes followed, and landed upon yards in front of us, and I saw what I can only describe as a 7-foot tall, pure black mass. I didn't know what to make of it. To be honest, I kept waiting for some realization that it was a weird angle of a tree or tarp or something, but that just never came. Instead, I saw that it had 2 small, dark beady eyes and like a flat dog-like nose. Like a pug, I guess. I don't think it had a snout, and it certainly wasn't cute. In fact, it was horrifyingly menacing. I didn't see hair or limbs, or anything else distinguishable, except that it was like shivering ever so slightly. It almost looked like it was buzzing or vibrating. In fact, this realization that this creature was something living instantly sent me into a panic, and my instincts took over. My cousin and I, we dashed back inside the house. He was running so fast that he tumbled along the way. In fact, we rushed inside and begged the rest of my family to come outside and take a look. My grandparents, though, were busy washing up after dinner, so we asked 2 of my other cousins, aged 14 and 9-ish, to come outside with us and to take a look. We marched back up to the spot on the trail where we saw the mass, and amazingly, it was still in the exact same spot. The 4 of us just stood for a second, all staring at this large creature, without knowing what the heck it was. My 14-year-old cousin, he took a small step towards the mass, in an attempt to figure out what we were all looking at, but suddenly the creature flinched. I distinctly remember the creature looking almost like it jumped, in fact, maybe just an inch or so off the ground, but it was so fast and jarring that my brain again went into panic mode, and I couldn't stop myself from dashing away, back into the house, all 3 of my cousins following right behind me, by the way, and we begged and begged our grandpa to come outside and take a look with us. He poked fun at us and thought that we were all just joking around, which, to be fair, we did pull a lot of pranks back then. But after about an hour, we finally convinced him, so we led him out to the spot. We could point exactly to where it stood. However, it was no longer there. There's a sort of small tree stump at the base of where it stood. So to this day, I know exactly where the spot where we saw it was. Also, just to be clear, I am 100% certain that it was not a bear. I once saw a bear on its hind legs, and it was not even comparable. And also, this thing was there in the exact same spot for like several minutes on end without moving. I've been asked why I didn't take a picture with my phone, but back then all I had was a flip phone. And more importantly, we didn't have cell phone service in that remote area until much later, so I didn't make a habit of carrying it around with me in the first place, to be honest. It's also important to note that this figure absolutely terrified me. I have one other experience where I saw a floating sphere of light when I was a kid, and this calmed me, despite being much younger and in general, much more afraid of the world. But this huge 7-foot black mass, it absolutely terrified me to my core, in a way that I cannot explain, other than instinctual and primal fear. Way before I was born, my parents traveled into Mexico and bought one of those bronze tin masks of a woman with green, glass pupils, long ring earrings, and a sort of tiara on her head. And for unknown reasons, my mother just loved it. The mask isn't particularly special or anything. I think it was just stuff made for tourists, to be honest. But an element everyone noticed right away was that the green eyes, they reflected amazingly well any source of light, making it sort of look like it glowed at night. By the time that I came around, that mask hung at the top of our living room wall, where my mom had a bunch of other paraphernalia from her trips. But my parents used to travel a lot. I should probably also mention, too, that we lived in a place with high ceilings, like 3.2 meters. Now kind of unrelated, but I was always afraid of the dark as a kid. Common in children, right? But I used to hear voices coming from the dark when I knew that my family was somewhere else. It used to make me cry for hours. In fact, but my dad told me that I just had to toughen up a bit, and my mother preferred to leave me crying, naked, in the hallway between the bathroom and my bedroom, than caving to my pleads to fetch my clothes, because there were people in my room or whatever. Now, one night when I was 5, I got woken up by a voice of a young woman. Calling my name, it came from the living room. And because it was late and I'd been sleeping, my eyes were sort of well adapted into the darkness. For me to see, I stepped off my bed, opened the door, and said something along the lines of, "Hello," or "SIS, is that you?" But they called me again, and that was when I saw it. It was the head of a young woman, green eyes glowing in the dark, and a tiara gleaming from the light, seeping through from the street. The floating head was actually flesh. Not tin or anything else flesh. But there was no neck or anything. It wasn't a grotesque view. It was an actual head just sort of floating there. The head descended from its spot to where I stood, in the middle of the living room, and it began telling me that I shouldn't be scared, because they just want to talk to me, that I should open up to hear better. I was really confused by that. I reached out to touch the head, and I felt the coldness on my skin. As I felt it, though, the skin dried and sort of flaked off, leaving a skull, but the green eyes were staring at me, and they remained fixated. Seeing that I screamed, I wanted to let go of the head as well, but it was honestly like I was frozen. And then suddenly the light came on. My mom was upset, asking me what I was doing. Screaming in the middle of the living room like that, in the dark, then she saw the mask in my hands, and she asked me how I got it off. Where it was. I told her everything that happened, but she ignored me and sent me back to sleep, which I obviously couldn't. Interestingly enough, too, the mask wasn't placed back on display after that, and it wasn't stored in the house after a while at all. Decades after that, I asked my mom what made her put it away, if she believed me at all, and she said that after that, she was really upset. And while she fetched a ladder to put it back up, she said that she heard a girl laughing, just from the table where she had put the mask before. Though it definitely spooked her. She said that she wasn't going to fall for any mental games, but eventually she got rid of it